The world does not end in fire. It ends in silence. Anne Askew learned this long before the pyre was lit, before the flames curled around her body like living verdicts. Long before the crowd gathered to watch her bones blacken into smoke, she understood the power of not screaming, of not begging, of not allowing the state, the church, or even the fire itself to consume the only part of her they could never reach, her voice. She was born into noise, into a century swollen with proclamations, executions, reformation, and fear. England, in the first half of the 16th century, was a realm cracking beneath the weight of kings and scripture. Henry VIII had torn the country from the Vatican's grasp and declared himself its spiritual head, and yet nothing was settled. Faith was no longer a sanctuary, it was a battlefield. One misquoted verse, one mispronounced doctrine, and your soul might belong to God, but your body would be ash. Anne's life began in relative comfort. She was born in 1521, the second daughter of Sir William Askew, a well-positioned landowner in Lincolnshire. Her father served King Henry and believed in obedience to law, tradition, and, most of all, to control. Anne, however, was different. From a young age, she sought not to obey, but to understand. She questioned, not to rebel, but to believe more deeply. The wrong century for such a mind. The wrong kingdom. The wrong sex. They tried to marry her mind to silence. When her older sister Martha died, Anne was forced to wed her betrothed, Thomas Kyme, a devout Catholic with no patience for scripture-reading wives. From the start, their union was a siege. Anne read the Bible aloud. She quoted Paul and Christ as if she knew them personally. She argued about transubstantiation, denied the Mass, and refused to sit quietly through superstition. Her home became a courtroom, each dinner table a debate, each night a verdict of bruises and silence. Eventually, she was thrown out. Not because she disobeyed, but because she could not be reshaped. She left her children, 2 of them, and walked away from domestic captivity with nothing but the clothes on her back and the verses in her heart. She went to London. The city was loud with the rumors of Reformation. Whispers tucked between sermons, printed tracts scattered like leaves across the markets. Anne sought not revolution, but resonance. She joined underground Protestant circles, prayed with zealots, studied Greek to read scripture without filters. And she wrote. Her words were not fiery, they were surgical. She dissected doctrine like a scholar, not a heretic. Her treatises were reasoned, measured, and precise, so precise they were dangerous. Because in a world where faith had become weaponized, clarity was treason. The court noticed. Anne was arrested in 1545, the first time. She was questioned and released. The state didn't know what to do with a woman who quoted Romans better than most. Priests. They watched, they waited. 2 years later, they returned. This time, they were ready not to question her, but to break her. She was taken to the Tower. The Tower of London is not just stone. It is a mind, made of cold and silence. It does not whisper, it waits. And in its deepest bowels, they brought her. She was 19 the first time she felt the iron touch of power. Now she was 25, thin, fire-eyed, but composed. The interrogators were not priests this time. They were statesmen, Chancellor Wriothesley, Bishop Gardiner, men who believed in silence, the way she believed in scripture. They asked her about communion, about who helped her write, about the Queen herself, Catherine Parr, whom they suspected of Lutheran sympathies. They wanted her to name names, to fold, to unravel into something usable. She didn't. Anne answered what she believed, that Christ's flesh was in heaven, and the bread was bread, that no priest could conjure divinity, that a woman might read the Bible and understand it better than a bishop if she read with prayer. They called it arrogance. They called it treason. They called it heresy. They called it enough. Interrogation became torture. And here, history blinks. Because Anne Askew remains the only woman on record to be tortured in the Tower of London. Legally, publicly, and not just any torture. She was racked. The rack is a machine of precision, not brutality. It stretches you slowly, evenly, with intention. Ankles locked, wrists clamped, the pulleys pull. One notch at a time. First discomfort, then pain, then dislocation, then tearing. She was small, thin, underfed. She should have broken immediately. She didn't. They kept pulling. She didn't scream. They pulled more. Her joints came undone. Her shoulders, knees, hips, all unknit, like cloth. She vomited. She passed out. They woke her, pulled again. Her spine curved, unnaturally. Her arms elongated until they no longer seemed part of a human form. Still, she said nothing. She did not give them names. She did not confess to conspiracy. She did not implicate the Queen, the court, or the church. She suffered not just for faith, but for integrity, a virtue power has never tolerated. When Wriothesley himself took hold of the crank and turned it, her silence was a revolution. When they were done, she could not walk. They carried her to her cell. Her body hung like cloth. Her voice remained. In the dark, with shattered bones, she composed a final confession, not to her accusers, but to time. A written record smuggled from prison that would become one of the earliest theological writings by a woman in English history. In it, she did not speak of pain. She spoke of belief, of endurance, of the moment when she was asked why she would not recant, and she replied, "I would rather read 5 lines in the Bible than hear 5 masses in the church." She spoke of strength not in the body, but in the word. They sentenced her to death, burning, publicly, at Smithfield, where rebels were reduced to lesson and smoke. She was carried to the stake in a chair. Her body could not stand. She wore a smock, plain and white, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. The crowd came to see spectacle, to see a heretic scream. Instead, they saw silence. Anne Askew did not curse. She did not cry. She did not scream as the flames rose. And though the fire took her bones, it could not unmake her. Because the truth about silence is this: it echoes. The flames that touched Anne Askew's skin were not quick. This was not mercy. It was message. At Smithfield, where animals were sold and sinners destroyed, the stake was not just a piece of wood. It was a pulpit of punishment, a theater for power to remind the people that belief had a cost, and that a woman with too much of it could be consumed by her own conviction. They chained her broken body upright. Her arms dangled at unnatural angles. Her legs, shattered from the rack, could not support even the weight of linen. She did not resist. She could not. But she did not look away. 4 others were to die with her that day. Men, priests, scholars, heretics by law. They stood. She sat, broken, but their eyes turned to her, as if drawing courage from the one who had endured more than all of them combined. The fire was lit, a slow burn. Oiled wood, thick smoke, a crowd of hundreds. And Anne, silent. Witnesses later wrote that she did not scream because she physically could not. Her lungs, already compromised, her body, too mangled to convulse. But others claimed it wasn't pain that held her silent, it was defiance. That even as her skin blackened, as the smoke crawled into her mouth, she refused to give her enemies the satisfaction of a sound. Because a scream can be twisted. A scream can be used, but silence. Silence lingers, it haunts, It questions. Her body eventually gave in, but something else remained, something unburnable. They thought they had destroyed her. They had tried everything: exile, marriage, pain, fire. What they had done instead was preserve her, not in flesh, but in ink. Because her writings survived, pages smuggled out of the tower. Letters written in the last days of her life. A voice recorded against the will of kings. She became one of the first women in English history to publish a theological defense of her beliefs. Not only that, her words were not hysterical, not impassioned rants of a woman unhinged, but sharp, articulate, reasoned. That was what made her dangerous. "I had rather die than break my faith." That sentence, written in trembling hand by a woman who could no longer walk, echoes louder than any sermon preached from royal pulpits. In killing her, the state hoped to extinguish her ideas. Instead, they gave them fire. Centuries passed. Monarchs changed. Churches merged. Doctrines softened. But her story, impossibly, quietly, survived. Not in stained glass, not in textbooks, but in resistance. Her name became a footnote in Protestant martyrologies. John Foxe immortalized her in his Book of Martyrs. And though history tried to paint her as victim or saint, the truth is harder to hold. Anne Askew was neither. She was not a martyr because she wanted death. She was not a saint because she never sought glory. She was a woman who chose not to recant, who endured the unendurable, who sat at the edge of human suffering and wrote. The silence she chose was not absence, it was weapon. Even today, it speaks louder than flame. In a time when belief was a sentence and women were meant to bow, she stood. Even when her bones were broken, she argued, even when her mouth was dry with pain. And in the end, she burned, but did not vanish. History wants noise. Kings shouting, armies clashing, crowds roaring. But Anne Askew left behind something stronger. Stillness. A kind of holy stillness that says, you can destroy the body, but not the truth. You can silence the voice, but not the silence. You can burn the flesh, but not the fire.